Ever since equity crowdfunding went live in 2016, there's been one clear leader, and that's WeFunder. Today, we're going to look at all the different aspects of WeFunder from both an investor and a founder's perspective, and we're going to give a quick overview and walkthrough of the portal. This is Brian from Crowdwise. Let's take a look at WeFunder. So today we're going to be going over the WeFunder equity crowdfunding platform. We'll be going over a complete review of all the different aspects of the WeFunder platform from both an investor and startup's perspective, and then give an overview and walkthrough and actually go to the portal, check it out, and let you know where you can find things that you need to find. So, in terms of some highlights and why we're starting with WeFunder for the first review of our funding portals, WeFunder is the largest in terms of capital raised. This means that both since 2016, when the Jobs Act Title III went live, and in 2019, more capital has been raised on the WeFunder platform than on any other platforms. In addition to that, it's also the number 2 Reg CF funding portal in terms of Form C filings. That essentially means the number of startups who are filing with the SEC in order to raise capital on WeFunder's platform. As a note, it was founded back in 2011, so WeFunder actually got started with Regulation D, which is for accredited investors only, and then moved over to also have Regulation A+ and Regulation Crowdfunding. If you're interested in checking out the Regulation D returns, since WeFunder is unique in that they've been around longer than most of these other portals, you can actually see what some of the equity crowdfunding returns have been to date at wefunder.com/results. And also, just as a point of interest, probably for investors, is that you're going to see a high quantity of YC alumni companies raising on WeFunder. That's because WeFunder itself was one of the companies that went through the Y Combinator accelerator program. And because of that, they have lots of partnerships and friends and relationships. And so many other Y Combinator companies that do choose to do equity crowdfunding will often choose to go on WeFunder. So as a reminder, WeFunder, again, 1/3 of all the capital raised in 2019. This was through October 2019. And then if you look at Form C filings, which is essentially the number of startups that are filing with the SEC to be able to raise capital using crowdfunding, WeFunder is in the blue here. And you can see they've been up there. Start Engine is also a big one, but WeFunder is definitely up there in terms of 2019 Form C filings. That's important for investors because that means more deal flow. And it's also important for startup founders because it means that WeFunder has a lot of experience in helping startups raise capital. So, as a quick high-level review before we get into the walkthrough, some of the pros of WeFunder. First, the deal flow. As we mentioned, they have the largest investor base and the most capital raised. This means that it attracts more startups. In turn, kind of the chicken and the egg, the more startups attracts more investors, and so it's a good win-win situation and environment for both investors and startups on the platform. In addition, as I mentioned, since WeFunder is unique in that they started with Regulation D back towards 2011-2012, they are one of the only funding portals, in fact, pretty much the only funding portal today, that is actually transparent in terms of what the investor returns have been, showing all their portfolio companies from Regulation D in terms of exits, failures, whether they've raised additional capital, etc. Because of that, it can be very good and informative for investors to take a look and see, what my returns have been if I was investing in certain companies. Again, we hope to see this on other platforms coming up, but right now WeFunder is one of the only ones. Also, because they are able to offer Regulation D, Regulation A+, and Reg CF, some of the deals won't sell out as fast, so they can actually do what's called a parallel offering, which is basically a side-by-side raise where any unaccredited investors will invest up to that 1.07 million cap under Reg CF, but then accredited investors can get rolled into their Reg D platform and their Reg D raise, which allows much higher maximums over the 1.07 million. Lastly, another pro is that they are one of the platforms and funding portals that do early bird bonuses. This essentially means if you invest earlier in a campaign after it has launched and before it reaches some minimum threshold, you might get a discount, for example, 20%, 30% off the valuation cap or off the share price. This is a way to obviously incentivize and get some early traction, try and attract investors to get some early momentum. Now, into some of the cons, there honestly aren't a whole lot from my experience, and WeFunder is one of the portals that I use. Basically, I think the navigation and menus can take a little bit longer to get familiar with. Maybe that UI, UX isn't quite as intuitive as some of the other platforms, but as you'll see once we jump into the actual platform itself and look at the website, it is very simple. It's pretty minimalist, and that can be a very good thing as well. It just takes maybe a little bit to figure out where you need to go to get certain information. So we'll be talking about all that. Now, a neutral and just a point of awareness is that there is no deal curation or due diligence on WeFunder. This is similar to a platform like Start Engine, but maybe different from platforms such as Seed Invest or Republic, which do have some extra due diligence and deal curation. This means that you will get potentially more opportunities presented to you, but it's more up to you, the investor, to determine whether that's an actual good investment opportunity or if it's perhaps not a good investment opportunity. This is one of the big benefits of crowdfunding in that it lets the crowd decide and doesn't leave it up to venture capitalists or traditional angels to decide what makes a good investment or not. But because of that, you just need to be a little more careful in what you're investing in because while it's gone through the basic anti-fraud checks and bad actor checks for Reg CF and that sort of thing, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good investment just because it was posted. So keep that in mind for WeFunder. Lastly, just one other unique thing. We've already mentioned this at the start, but you're going to see many more YC, Y Combinator alumni companies on this platform as well, since they did go through the YC program themselves. Just as a quick overview, and then we're going to be jumping into the actual funding portal. So here's a quick snapshot in terms of some of the key statistics for investors and startups to be aware of. There are 316,000 plus investors, which is one of, if not the largest. Deal flow, 103 deals so far in 2019, raised nearly 84 million so far in 2019. This is number 2, and this is ranked number 1 among all funding portals. And then due diligence and deal curation, as we mentioned, no. If you're an investor, you do have a 3.5% fee with a $8 min or a $75 max on every investment you make. So just keep in mind that helps kind of offset some of those credit card charges and everything else so that the startup gets most of the money. In addition, if you're an issuer, the fee is basically up to 75% of the amount raised. So if you raise $1 million, 7.5%, $75K, if my math is correct there, that you'll be paying to the funding portal. So just keep that in mind. And there are some discounts also that we'll be talking about shortly that you can get to that if you get referral, but that's what startups pay. Other incentives, so early bird discounts, as we mentioned. There is no secondary market on WeFunder, so don't expect to be able to trade your shares where that may be possible, although it's still very early on some other portals. And then lastly, you can invest with a credit card. So that concludes our WeFunder funding portal review and overview. So in order to get our checklist that actually compares all the different funding portals for both investors and startup founders, head over to crowdwise.org/portals. It's going to give you all the information we covered today in a nice comparable format so you can look and compare and contrast different portals. And thank you. Next up, make sure you click on the video to watch the in-depth WeFunder walkthrough. We'll actually give you a quick tour of the platform, walking around all the important things, offering pages, and everything else you need to know.